Hey, scholars. The midterm exam's coming up on Tuesday, and the chapters are going to be from the text, chapter 1, 2, 4, 5, 8, 9, and 10, from book 1, chapters 2 and 5, and from book 2, chapters 4 and 6. And if you've been keeping up with your reading, you'll know that that's a lot of material. So let's go through relatively quickly the things that you need to be studying. I'm not going to say this is an all inclusive list, but it should be most of the things that you're going to need to know to do well on the exam. So start with chapter 1. What is Pod C? What is the job of an operations manager? Plan, organize, direct, control. We talked about efficiency. What's efficiency and why is it so important in both economics and in operations management? What are some of the basics of economics that we looked at in class? That's the supply and the demand curve. What are the 10 OM decisions? And which ones are most critical in your mind? Which ones did we review over the last 4 weeks in class? How do businesses compete? They compete on quality, they compete on price, and they compete on responsiveness. Sometimes you all say speed, but I like responsiveness better. What's an income statement? What's a balance sheet? What's a statement of cash flow? What is the makeup of those statements? What's a KPI, a key performance indicator? What are the three main things that a operations manager has to control? Time, team, and money. Chapter 2, we talked about mission and vision statements. What are they supposed to do? They're supposed to do two things. One is inspire, two is enroll. We spent time in class actually looking at some sample, found some sample mission statements and vision statements. And we read those. You should know what the basic components of a mission statement or vision statement are. We look at strategy, and there's many, many different tools for strategy. The three that we spent the most time on are the Porter 5 forces, the SWOT analysis, and the more or less stop-start analysis from Blue Ocean Strategy. We looked at when you do develop a strategy, what are the four main things that you need to keep in mind? You need to keep your customer in mind, you need to keep your product in mind, you need to keep your competition in mind, and everything else, legal, regulatory, environmental, blah, blah, everything else, all need to be taken into consideration as you're developing your strategy. We looked at the product life cycle. We looked at the theory of comparative advantages or advantage. So you need to know all of those things. On forecasting, it's a fairly meaty chapter. I mean, that's where I spend most of my time in my business. But we talked a lot about regression analysis and an R squared. There's a video that I gave you which went into a lot more detail about things that you do and don't do. Doing a regression analysis. Watch that video. The quality chapter out of my book. We talked about Juran and we talked about Deming. You need to study those guys and know what the heck they were all about. Deming was more culture related. Juran was more quantitative, more let's get in and understand from a dollars and cents perspective what's going on. We talked about the second law of thermodynamics. We talked about the only failure is the failure to participate. You got to allow your people to fail once in a while. We talked about figure 5.3, and this is design of goods and services. And that's the flow chart that you go through. That's an important chart. Take a look at it. Make sure that you understand the concepts there. We talked about, it was that example, it had three different widget things. And one was more elaborate. It cost $3.50 to a simplified one that cost 80 cents. So that's a big part of the job of an operations manager is to make things better, make them cheaper. That was a good example of it. Chapters 8 through 10, I just put videos on those. So watch those videos again and make sure that you're comfortable with what's on there. As far as human resources go, there was the list that we went through in class on the board. We didn't get through the entire chapter, but we got through most of what I wanted to cover. So the HR list on the board, and then I did a more thorough video on human resources since we didn't get a chance to go through the whole thing in class. We talked about a couple of bottlenecks. You need to understand that bottleneck math. There may be a question you may get a math question on bottleneck math and how do you calculate a bottleneck and what do you do about it? And we spent a lot of time talking about that you don't maximize profitability by producing the most of the highest margin product, but you produce you maximize the profitability, if you will, at the bottleneck. And how do you calculate that? So know that, how to do that. And we talked about constraints and how do you define constraints in in an operation, and what do you do about it when you find one? There's more. That's a lot of chapters. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 chapters. A lot of reading. As promised, this is a meaty class and there's a lot to it. So study this stuff hard. The exam will be a lot like the quizzes that you've seen, so I'm not going to surprise anybody, but I'm also not going to say that this is a completely exhaustive list of everything, but it should cover most of it. I'll see you all on Tuesday and look forward to seeing a whole bunch of A's on this midterm.